You think it's just irritation, just an opinion, just a normal reaction. But look honestly, digital rage does not arise within you. It is pulled out of you. A calculated headline, a venomous comment, a clip taken out of context, and suddenly your chest tightens, your breathing changes, your mind accelerates, your finger is already trying to prove something to someone who isn't even there. The problem is not feeling anger. The problem is losing command. The moment impulse takes over, you stop choosing, you react. And when you react, you become predictable. And when you become predictable, you become easy to guide, easy to provoke, easy to use. This is how capture happens. You think you are defending ideas, but you are only giving away your attention. You think you are being strong, but you are being triggered. You think you are in control, but someone already knows exactly what irritates you, what makes you type too fast, what pulls you back to the screen. And the moment your anger becomes a pattern, it stops being an emotion and becomes a path along which anyone can pull you. Emotional intelligence. The modern Stoic is not cold. He is sovereign. There is a common confusion. Many people think emotional intelligence means forcing self-control, swallowing everything, locking the face, pretending nothing affects them, as if maturity meant turning into stone. But that is not emotional intelligence. That is repression. Repression is when you push emotion down without understanding what it is saying. You may look calm on the outside, but inside, the pressure only increases. And what is repressed does not disappear. It accumulates, rots, returns stronger, and explodes in the wrong place. The modern Stoic does not numb himself. He does not perform indifference. He feels. He notices anger rising in the body, tension in the chest, the jaw tightening, the breath shortening, the heat rising. He feels the impulse wanting to escape through the hand, to turn into response, attack, irony, humiliation. But here is the decisive difference. He does not identify with it. He does not say, "I am this anger." He does not turn emotion into identity. He understands that emotion is an internal event, not an order. Anger arrives as a signal, not a command. And emotional intelligence begins exactly here, when you can observe the emotion without being dragged by it. It's like watching a wave forming. The common person sees the wave and jumps in. The Stoic sees the wave and asks, "What is this trying to tell me? And above all, do I need to act now? Or do I simply need to remain firm?" Because the great deception of anger is urgency. Anger always comes with the lie, "Respond now. Prove it now. Don't let this pass. Show strength." But most of the time, this urgency is not justice. It is ego. It is not courage. It is fear of appearing weak. It is not truth. It is the need to win. And when you obey this urgency, you hand the steering wheel to the most impulsive part of yourself. The Stoic does the opposite. He creates an interval, a small space between feeling and acting. And inside that space, he returns to center. He observes before obeying because he understands a simple rule. What you do not observe, you become. What you observe, you govern. Unseen impulses don't ask for permission. They take control. When anger moves in the dark, it fuses with identity. You stop saying, "I feel anger," and start saying, "This is who I am right now." And once emotion becomes identity, every reaction feels justified, every excess feels earned. Observation breaks that fusion. It pulls anger out of the shadows and places it in front of you, where it can be examined instead of obeyed. And this is where many misunderstand Stoicism. Governing is not suppressing. Suppression is fear-based. It tightens the grip, pushes the emotion down, and pretends the pressure isn't building. Governance is different. Governance is intelligent direction. To govern is to channel. It is to take raw, volatile energy and give it form. The same way fire can burn a house or heat it, anger can destroy or strengthen, depending on who commands it. Channeled anger becomes posture, calm, unshakable presence that refuses to be dragged. It becomes boundaries, clear, firm limits that don't require explanation or escalation. It becomes strategic silence, the deliberate refusal to feed noise, knowing that attention is fuel. It becomes a just response, precise, measured, aimed at truth rather than dominance. And sometimes the highest form of governance is no response at all. Because not every stimulus deserves movement, not every provocation deserves presence. When responding would only feed the chaos, restraint becomes strength. Silence becomes authority, and by choosing not to react, you deny the world its favorite reward, your emotional energy. This is mastery, not over others, but over yourself. In practical terms, this Stoic perspective changes everything. He begins to see that many online reactions are not about the post or the person. They are about old wounds, the need for validation, fear of rejection, wounded pride, a sense of powerlessness. Anger becomes a disguise for something deeper. And when you see this, you stop being hostage to the trigger. You stop being predictable. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes real power. It is not feeling. It is feeling with clarity. It is recognizing the impulse without kneeling to it. It is being able to say internally, I am angry, but I am not my anger. I choose what I do with it. Emotional intelligence begins with recognition. Before any technique, before any philosophy, there is a starting point that separates the reactive man from the conscious man. Perceiving what is happening inside without makeup, without justification, without story. Most people don't simply feel an emotion, they dress it up. They decorate it the way a lawyer decorates a case, with motives, conclusions, accusations, certainty. They don't sit with the raw reality of the feeling. They rush to give it a story, because a story makes the emotion feel clean, righteous, and defensible. So they don't say, I'm angry. They say, I'm angry because they're ignorant. I'm angry because this is unacceptable. I'm angry because I'm right. And that shift matters, because the moment you attach a verdict to the emotion, you stop relating to anger as a signal and start treating it like a mission. It's no longer something happening inside you. It becomes something you must execute. You're no longer observing, you're recruiting. You turn anger into a soldier and hand it a target. That's when the mind becomes a furnace. It starts feeding the flame with whatever it can find. Old memories that match the mood, assumptions that make the other person look worse, imagined insults that were never said but feel plausible. It replays the scene, edits it, amplifies it. It pulls in past humiliations, past betrayals, past moments where you felt powerless. And suddenly the present moment isn't just the present moment anymore. It's the entire history of your ego standing up to fight. This is why anger becomes addictive. Because a decorated anger feels meaningful, it feels like purpose, it feels like strength. And the ego loves nothing more than a feeling that makes it the hero of a conflict. Until that anger feels not only justified, but necessary. Necessary to respond, necessary to punish, necessary to prove, necessary to win. And once anger becomes necessary, you're no longer using it, it's using you. The conscious man refuses that seduction. He does not rush to blame. He does not rush to prove. He does not rush to become the emotion. He starts with one clean sentence, cold, honest, undeniable. I am angry. No theatrics, no accusation, no moral costume, just recognition. And that recognition is not passive, it is power. Because naming the emotion breaks the trance. It separates the observer from the fire. It forces a pause in the chain reaction. Stimulus, judgment, reaction. In that pause, you reclaim something most people surrender instantly, the ability to choose. This is why I am angry is not weakness. It is discipline. It is sovereignty. It is the first act of emotional intelligence and the first act of Stoicism, refusing to let the external world write the script of your internal state. Once you can say, "I am angry" without story, you can finally ask the questions that matter. What did this touch in me? Pride, control, fear, insecurity? Is this under my control? What response preserves my dignity? And from that point on, you are no longer reacting, you are governing. It sounds too simple to be powerful, but this is exactly where the strength lies, because when anger enters, it tries to disguise itself as virtue. It arrives dressed as justice, courage, truth. I will not accept this. And if you believe this fantasy, you allow emotion to assume the role of judge. You act as if you were defending a principle, when in reality you are only defending your wounded ego. That is why the Stoic does not begin with "I am right." He does not begin with "they are idiots." He does not begin with "this is unacceptable." These phrases are not recognition, they are verdicts. They are the beginning of war. And in the digital world, every war begins with an inflamed certainty. True recognition is raw and honest. I am angry. No adjective, no accusation, no narrative. And this act restores command for a psychological and practical reason. When you name the emotion, you stop being it. You come out of the trance. You stop operating on autopilot. You create a mental space in which emotion stops being a motor and becomes an observed object. That is why naming creates distance. And distance is power. Distance means I can see this happening inside me, and if I can see it, I can choose. The common person does not name, he justifies. He gives anger reasons to exist, and when you justify, you feed it. The mind begins building arguments, images, memories, comparisons, everything to keep the flame alive. And then it is no longer a moment of anger. It becomes a state, an identity, a posture. The Stoic does the opposite. He interrupts the escalation at the beginning. He does not argue with the emotion. He identifies it. And by identifying it, he puts anger in its proper place, not as absolute truth, but as an internal signal. From there, the second part of recognition is born. I am angry, and I want to understand why. Because anger almost always protects something: pride, the need for control, fear of disrespect, a sense of impotence. It rarely appears as just anger. It appears as armor, a shield your mind raises the moment it senses vulnerability. And that is why anger feels powerful. It gives you a posture when you feel exposed. It gives you speed when you feel cornered. It gives you a weapon when you fear being seen as small. But the post was only the trigger. The fuel was already inside. The digital world is simply skilled at striking the match. It touches the exact nerves that already exist. The part of you that needs to be right, the part that can't tolerate being ignored, the part that interprets disagreement as disrespect, the part that mistakes losing control for standing your ground. The screen doesn't create your wound, it reveals it. It doesn't manufacture your insecurity, it activates it. And this is the turning point. When you recognize that, you stop fighting the world and begin working where it actually matters, in your judgment. Because the war is not truly with the post, the war is with the meaning you assign to it. I must respond or I'm weak. If they disagree, they're attacking me. If I don't correct this, I'm losing. These are judgments, not facts. And as long as your mind treats them like facts, anger will keep returning as a reflex, not as a choice. Stoic emotional intelligence is the ability to interrogate your own interpretation before you obey it. It is the discipline of asking, what exactly did I just assume? What am I afraid it means about me? What value is being threatened here? Truth, status, pride, control. Is this under my control? Or am I trying to control what cannot be controlled? When you do that, anger loses its hypnosis. It stops being a command and becomes data. And once anger is data, you can redirect it into silence instead of escalation, into precision instead of attack, into boundaries instead of humiliation, into virtue instead of revenge. Because the real battlefield has never been the comment section. It has always been the courtroom inside your mind, where your judgments decide whether you remain sovereign or become possessed. So recognition is not weakness. It is intelligence in its purest form. It is you saying, I will not call this justice before being certain. I will not call this truth before thinking. I will not declare war before knowing whether this deserves my energy. And this is how you leave reactive mode and enter Stoic mode. First you recognize, then you choose, and only then, if necessary, you act. Emotion is information, not command. The man without emotional intelligence confuses emotion with truth. He feels and concludes, then it is real. He gets irritated and decides, then it is unjust. He feels offended and declares, then it is personal. Emotion becomes evidence, sensation becomes verdict, and impulse becomes law. If it hurts, it must be answered. If it bothers, someone must pay. And when life turns into this internal tribunal, he does not live in peace. He lives on alert, searching for culprits to justify what he feels. This is how anger gains power. It disguises itself as clarity. It gives the impression that you saw something clearly, when in reality you were merely activated. It accelerates thought, and that feels like intelligence. But it is only speed. And speed without discernment is blindness. That is why the reactive person does not respond to what happened. He responds to what he believes happened. He does not see facts. He sees threats. And in the digital world, threat is the easiest lens when you are already exhausted. The Stoic understands something deeper. Emotion is information, not order. Emotion is an alarm, not a commander. It points to something, but it does not decide what you must do. Anger is warning that something touched a value, a boundary, a pride, or an expectation. Perhaps someone disrespected you. Perhaps you felt diminished. Perhaps you want to control what cannot be controlled. Perhaps your ego was poked. Anger is not the enemy, but it is also not the truth. It is raw data that must be interpreted with reason. And here is the turning point. The same anger can create two completely different lives. In the weak mind, it becomes attack, destruction, sharp words, regret, exhaustion. In the trained mind, it becomes discipline, an invitation to strengthen self-control, adjust expectations, impose boundaries with justice, or simply retreat with dignity. That is why it is up to you to decide what to do with this signal. You can obey the impulse and reinforce the habit of reacting, or you can use anger as raw material and transmute it into principle. Temperance not to explode, wisdom to see the whole, justice not to wound for pleasure, courage to endure the discomfort of not responding. The difference between the two men is not who feels anger. It is who commands when anger arrives. Sovereignty, delay, survival, and inner empire. That is why the Stoic is not cold. He is sovereign. Coldness is absence. Sovereignty is mastery. The Stoic does not disconnect from what he feels. He places himself above the impulse. He does not flee anger or pretend it does not exist. He faces it, recognizes its presence, and consciously decides what to do with it. This is not repression, it is internal command. He does not try to eliminate anger, because that is impossible and, at its core, naive. Anger is part of the human structure. It arises before reason, in the body, in the nervous system, as a response to something interpreted as threat or violation. The Stoic understands this, and precisely because he understands it, he does not wage war against his nature, he governs it. To govern anger is to refuse to let it occupy the throne. It may be present, but it does not decide. It may speak, but it gives no orders. It may warn, but it does not command. In the digital environment, this becomes even more critical. Feeling anger, there is not weakness. It is almost inevitable. The problem begins when anger assumes the role of thinking for you, when it decides your tone, your timing, your words. At that moment, you are no longer acting. You are being pushed. Loss of control almost always happens subtly. It does not begin with explosion. It begins with concession. You concede speed to emotion. You concede urgency. You concede the right to decide now. And the more you concede, the more natural obedience becomes. Anger stops being a visitor and becomes a habit. The Stoic notices this critical point and steps back. He asks, "Am I deciding right now, or is the impulse deciding?" That simple question restores internal hierarchy, because sovereignty is not never feeling. Sovereignty is never surrendering command, even when feeling is intense. In the end, the Stoic understands what the common man ignores. Whoever hands emotion the authority to decide also hands over his dignity. And in the digital world, where everything tries to pull you out of yourself, maintaining this sovereignty is not aesthetic virtue, it is mental survival.